All right, so good afternoon. Welcome to Virginia Cyber Range weekly workshops. So this is our last session of the semester. We're getting ready to close up weekly workshops for the summer. I think folks are rolling up their academic years and fixing to be off for the summer. And then as far as us Virginia Cyber Range folks, we have a bunch of travel and other stuff going on during the summer. So this will end it for the year, and then we'll pick up again in the fall. So welcome. Today we're gonna finish up our discussion of CTF challenges, and I'm going to talk about reconnaissance challenges. And so if you want to participate with me, then there's a practice CTF that's up. You can just go to your web browser, https://practicectf. Once you get there, then you just hit the register link in the upper right-hand corner. You can register an account and start playing right away. If you already have an account and you forgot your password, then you can go to the login, click the login link, and then there's a forgot my password thing that you can click on, and click on that, and you can get your password reset. So that's the CTF. If you want a cyber basics environment to play around with, and you don't have one, then go ahead and go to the Virginia Cyber Range exercise area. So go to console.virginiacyberrange.net, and you'll see this login page. Click the link on the lower left corner of the login pop-up, and it says have invitation code, and then you type in the invitation code that I've provided here, and it'll take 10 or 15 minutes for your environment to get spun up. But once you do that, you'll have access to a cyber basics environment which has a Kali virtual machine, and that's that may be helpful as you look at these CTF challenges. Although I'll tell you, with the reconnaissance challenges, maybe not so much, right? So with reconnaissance stuff, we'll see that you know, the tooling maybe isn't quite as important, but I'll let you be the judge. Okay, so let's kick it off here. Weekly workshops. This is the standard commercial I give, right? Coverage of cybersecurity education topics each Tuesday at 1 p.m. And we don't generally get a lot of concurrent or synchronous viewers, but we get a lot of folks who download these after the fact, and we post them and share them all at virginiacyberrange.org on the webpage. So if you click on the community tab, then there's a button for weekly workshops, and there's a couple of dozen or more of these recorded workshops covering a variety of different topics hanging out there. If there's a particular topic that you want to see, then you should send us an email at contact@virginiacyberrange.org. Tell us what the topic is. Again, this will be the last one for this academic year, but we will add your topic to the queue for the fall. I like to hit a couple of quick news stories anytime I'm teaching a class or giving a seminar. So here's a couple of interesting news stories just from the last couple of days. First one is the story of a district judge in Massachusetts, which gave the ATF agents a warrant authorizing them to press the fingers, including the thumbs of a suspect, to the Touch ID sensor of any Apple cellular phone recovered during the search. And they actually, in the warrant, they also gave the ATF authorization to have anybody else present at the location of the search to require them to press their fingers to any Apple device. And this has gone back and forth a little bit. So this is requiring people to use biometrics to open to unlock digital devices. And so if you secure your phone or your digital device with a passcode and not with your a biometric replacement for the passcode, then the law enforcement officers cannot compel you to give them your passcode to unlock the phone, and they cannot compel you to use your passcode to unlock the phone, because that is a violation of the Fifth Amendment, which says that you don't have to give testimony that could incriminate you. and so this is essentially the same thing, right? It's requiring somebody to unlock the device, but they no longer have to provide testimony. They simply have to use either a thumbprint to open the device, or they can have the, they can sort of show the phone at the person, and if it uses face recognition to open. This has gone back and forth over the last few months. Up until maybe 2-3 months ago, it was this very thing was standard practice. You could, an agent could get a warrant, and basically pretty much any law enforcement officer could get a warrant that said you can compel somebody to unlock a device using biometric identifiers. But a couple of months ago, there was a federal judge that said that, I think it was out west, Colorado maybe. Anyway, a federal judge that said, using biometrics to unlock a device is essentially the same thing as using a passcode. And so by allowing law enforcement to require suspects to use biometrics to unlock devices is tantamount to requiring them to divulge their passcode, which we already know is violation of the Fifth Amendment. And so, we're sort of breaking the spirit of the amendment here by requiring the use of biometrics. And so, this was a different case, obviously, but basically the federal judge said that law enforcement would not be allowed to do that in his district. And so this sort of turns it back around again. This is a district judge in a different part of the United States with obviously taking the opposite stance and saying that this should be allowed. So my expectation is that this will be sorted out in the courts over the coming months. I just thought it was interesting that I sort of thought that when this federal judge made this ruling out west, that ruling would become precedent and it would be recognized more broadly, but apparently there's still a dispute about this. Here's another story from over the weekend. So this is about, there's been conflict in the Middle East for a long time, and over the weekend, the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians sort of heated up a little bit, as it often does. In this particular incident, the Israeli Defense Forces claimed that they bombed and partially destroyed a building in Gaza because it was allegedly the base of an active hacking group. So basically what they said was that, pen's acting up again. Basically what they said was that these Hamas hackers were actively trying to subvert digital systems of the Israeli Defense Forces, and so that they took kinetic action against these hackers. And this sort of ramps up the level of cyber warfare a little bit. The U.S. actually has said that that a cyber attack can in fact be an act of war, and if a cyber attack on the U.S. is deemed an act of war, then the U.S. can take response basically across the range of response options, and that includes their kinetic response, right? So somebody uses a cyber attack as an act of war against the United States, the United States can then drop bombs or whatever. For a cyber attack to be an act of war, though, that there's a pretty specific definition for what is deemed, in the laws of armed conflict. There's some fairly clear definitions of what an act of war is. It's a little bit fuzzier in cyberspace, but I think there's sort of this common agreement that it has to kill people or break things, like physically break things or kill people. So things have to be damaged, and in any warfare scenario, the response is going to be proportional to the original attack, right? So if somebody fires a rifle at an individual combatant, for example, dropping an A-bomb on them is not proportional. So that would be a violation of the rule of the laws of armed conflict. So So a kinetic response to even to a cyber attack, if it kills people and breaks things, that it has to be proportional. This is interesting because this is sort of the first recorded case of a kinetic response to a supposed cyber attack. Of course, apparently the people in this building were Israeli, or were basically Hamas insurgents or Hamas fighters, part of their intelligence community. So did they just bomb this thing because there were some guys that were hacking them in the building? Probably not. I mean, it's sort of a interesting way to frame it. And this, the announcement was basically made over Twitter over the weekend, but there's some pretty good. There's actually a pretty decent article about this in Wired Mag. Oh, I guess that's the screenshot I have up here. This was, of course, reported across multiple news media, but there's this Wired magazine article about it, and it kind of talks about the different sides of what when would this be, when might this be appropriate, and when would it not be appropriate, and get some quotes from some different experts in the field. So not a bad article. Okay, so that's it for news. So this week, oh, my slides are wrong. Look at that. This week, we're gonna talk about reconnaissance. And then next week, we're done, right? So we'll talk about some reconnaissance challenges. Again, if you want to play along, then you should screenshot this slide, and this will give required details to join the CTF and to get a Cyber Basics environment spun up. All right, so with that, I'm going to close this slideshow, save it because I made a change to it. Got my environment ready to go. So I'm actually going to turn this on so that by the time I get to it, it'll be ready to go. All right, so let me jump way ahead here because I've already talked about most of these slides. Yeah, forgive me here. I'm trying to cryptography. Where is my reconnaissance slide? Forensics. There we go. Totally lost my slide. All right, so reconnaissance challenges. The reason I put this at the end of this series of workshops on CTF challenges is because reconnaissance is basically a grab bag, right? So for the other categories, the things that fit into the categories are fairly neat. So, cryptography challenges are going to be things with encoding or crypto. Networking challenges are going to be something having very much to do with networking. So you're generally going to be digging into a packet capture or investigating some real-time network traffic. Reverse engineering challenges are going to give you some piece of software, and you're going to have to figure out how it works and figure out how to defeat the, however the piece of software is encoding the flag. Reconnaissance challenges are all those things that don't fit neatly into another category. And so reconnaissance challenges are sort of raw problem solving. And the beauty of these things is that most of them don't require particular skill in any cybersecurity discipline, right? They're raw problem solving. So there's generally a lot of Googling involved. There's often a lot of learning involved, right? I've always said, and hopefully I've said throughout this series of CTF workshops, that a CTF challenge is designed to teach somebody something, right? So hopefully students learn something along the way. So when students encounter reconnaissance challenges, these are great for new CTF solvers. If they don't have a lot of experience with crypto or with networking or whatever, you can sort of throw them at these reconnaissance challenges, and even beginner CTF players can maybe solve some pretty difficult reconnaissance challenges, because again, it's just a matter of problem solving. These are usually best approached in pairs. I usually encourage students who are participating in CTFs to work together as a team of generally 2 people is kind of the sweet spot. I mean, you can get 3 or 4 people together on a particular challenge, but generally 2 people sort of working in tandem, because so if somebody, one person is Googling and the other person is sort of looking over their shoulder, they might see something that the other person didn't necessarily notice, or they might sort of, they see some sort of breadcrumb that takes them on the next step towards a solution. So, so the tools that you might use to solve these kinds of challenges, the reconnaissance challenges, generally Google is your number one resource, right? You're going to be using Google or some other search engine to find stuff. This can also be a good resource, the Internet Wayback Machine. Internet Wayback Machine. So it's at archive.org, and the Internet Wayback Machine hosts old copies of web pages. So dating back to the 1990s, so it doesn't archive every version of every web page dating back to the 1990s. But if you go to any major domain, vt.edu, for example, maybe I'll try this real quick. So if you have a web browser open and you go to archive.org, and go to a domain, go into vt.edu, what you get is what I want is web pages, so I can go back to old content dating back to, say, 1994. And I want to see web pages, search text contents, TV news, kind of search archived websites. That's what I want. Okay, so this shows me web pages going back to, these are vt.edu web pages going back to 1997. So if I click on 1997, I can see which, so the first ever archived web page for vt.edu is on April 1st, 1997. And if I open that up, oh, it's not able to render it. I guess this HTML is so old that it won't even render in my browser. That's kind of odd. So I'm going to go back and see if I can get to another web page. vt.edu, way a long time ago, June. Yeah, interesting. I guess I'm not sure why these aren't rendering, but normally what you would see here is the original web page from back in Oops, put it in the wrong place. I wanted to assert, yeah, that's what I wanted, right? HTTP. Go to no, why it doesn't like that, but if you're doing a CTF, for example, that talks about a particular organization and a certain year or hints towards a year, then what you can do potentially with the internet web. Okay, so here's a Virginia Tech web page from back in 2009. So this is the old vt.edu website. It's got the older branding. So if you looked at today's VT website, it doesn't look like this anymore, right? So this is the page from back in 2009. If we can go to 2004, January 2004. Yeah, okay, so different again, right? So this is January 12th, 2004, and maybe able to click around in here a little bit, but mostly what they capture is sort of the top level stuff out of a website. Looks like it's trying to pull something up. Yeah, okay, so this is old stuff, right? This is the old branding, the old web page from 15 years ago. So if you have a question that relates to a particular organization that's been around for a while, the Wayback Machine is often a good resource to find information. You might do something like who is lookups. So who is gives you information about a domain. So if you're asked for who owns this domain, or what's the IP address for this particular domain name, or what's the phone number of the sysadmin, or they're just different questions you might get asked about a particular domain or a particular IP address, and how they're associated and that kind of stuff. And then there's a tool also called Showdown. And Showdown is a tool that lets you look at things that are not web pages. Showdown is a search engine so it's www.showdown.io. It's a website for things that are not web pages. So search engine for the Internet of Things, search engine for security, search engine for buildings. You see this changing, moniker on your thing here. And so what Showdown does is it is looking for, it's crawling the web, but it's crawling the internet. What a normal web crawler does is it indexes HTTP and HTTPS sites. So it's looking for websites and secure websites. It's looking at servers that are listening on port 80 or port 443. Those are the two web ports. And Showdown doesn't do that exactly. Showdown looks at all open ports, and so you can use Showdown to find things that are not web pages in an organization's network. And so if I were to go to vt.edu, for example, I can see that 133 results. Doesn't say what port it's picking up, but it's giving me this warning. This is a system. This system is the property of Virginia Tech. Unauthorized access or use is a violation of university policy. Yada yada yada. It's giving me IP addresses of things. It's not giving me a port number. You can see this is not. This is not what you get back from a web search, right? This is identifying things that are not web pages that are running on servers around the Virginia Tech campus. And so with Showdown, you can do a search for specific types of devices. So you can look for webcams, for example, or you can look for printers on a network, because there are specific ports that printers operate on. And so some reconnaissance challenges sort of drive you towards finding some specific device on an organization's network, and Showdown might be a good tool to do that kind of a thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my CTF. So here I am in my Cyber Basics environment. And I'm going to log in here. I'm going to pull up my CTF and we will solve a couple of CTF challenges. And the idea here is just to give you a sense of what these challenges might look like. And then I'll point you at a couple more difficult ones and maybe give you some hints on how you might approach them. All right, so here is our backer.io/practice CTF. Reconnaissance challenges are all right up here at the top, right? So we'll just sort of dive in here. Here's the first reconnaissance challenge. It's called Voodoo Goat. And then it says, secret squirrel's boss, the chief, loves his pipe tobacco. What's his favorite flavor? Okay, so Voodoo Goat talks about secret squirrel, pipe tobacco. All right, so here you might have to, you know, if you don't have any idea what this is talking about, what you might do is, remember we said that the challenge name is sometimes a hint. So let's go to our Googler here and type in Voodoo Goat. Okay, and there's some things here. Voodoo Goat is a mutator in goats, which gives the goat a top hat with, yeah, I'm not quite sure what that is. So that's something, right? Voodoo Goat mutator, official goat simulator wiki, gamepedia.com. I guess that's getting blocked by our proxy. Haitian worshippers sacrifice goats. The Voodoo Goat. Okay, there's a book called The Voodoo Goat. Paperback in Amazon. Ooh, from $200. I don't want to buy that book. Oh, here's Secret Squirrel Voodoo Goat. Okay, Secret Squirrel. Well, that was in the thing, right? So it said Secret Squirrel's boss, the chief, loves pipe player. Okay, so this is okay. So it must have something to do with Secret Squirrel. So let's put in some more. Whoops, what did I do? Did I close my browser? I didn't mean to do that. Oh, I went to the other. Not quite sure what I did there, but I'm going to bring it back up again. So Voodoo Goat, Secret Squirrel. Voodoo Goat, Secret Squirrel. Okay, Voodoo Goat, Secret Squirrel. It's a cartoon, right? Secret Squirrel cartoon from back in the 60s. And it talked about the chief. So chief pipe tobacco. Secret Squirrel, show quotes, facts, and trivia. Okay, chief. Oh, hey, look at this. We found out in this episode that the chief uses special sour cherry flavored tobacco in his pipe. Okay, well, that's interesting. Let's try that. I have to log in here again because I somehow screwed up my browser. Okay, Voodoo Goat. And let's paste that in there. Special sour cherry, submit. Oh, how's that incorrect? Oh, there we go. Got it. Sour cherry. Sour cherry is what it was. Okay, so that was it, right? That was not a whole lot of Googling, but I got to the answer. And I sort of talked through my thought process as I did it. Here's another one. It's a number, 11,185,272. It's worth 15 points. What's next, it says. What's next? Well, is it 11,185,273? No. All right, maybe I put in that number and Google it. Okay. Mersenne prime digits. 11,185,272. 11,185,272. Okay, so this number seems to be a particular type of prime number, and mega prime. No, what is this? Let's get me somewhere near. Let me do a search on this page for that number, and I'll paste it in. Oh, okay. Okay, so here's that number, and what's next? Decimal. Oh, this is the number of digits in large prime numbers, and this appears to be the largest, the most number of digits in these prime numbers. So I'm going to grab this. A little bit easier maybe than I. And that's the answer. Okay, so it was, it's the number of decimal digits in large prime numbers, and this seems to be the ranking, the longest prime, the largest prime number, starting with number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so I took so there's this number of decimal digits in the 6th largest prime, and what's next is the 5th largest prime, which has a million and a half more prime digits. So that's, so again, Googling. It's all about the Googling. All right. Here's one, Joshua. Let's see if we can blow this up a little bit so you can see it better. So this classic 80s hacker movie is about a high school student hacking into a government supercomputer and almost starting World War III. The main character was based on a real person and even uses his first name. What is the last name of the inspiration for this main character? Okay, so Joshua is the name of so this is, I don't know how much Googling it would take to discover what the movie is. If you're of a certain age, then the movie comes to mind instantly as War Games, and that's a classic hacker movie with Matthew Broderick, and he is a high school kid, and he hacks into a government supercomputer and gets it to play this thermonuclear war game, and then they have to figure out how to stop it, right? So the movie was actually based on an actual person, and so if you, again, this is a Googling expedition. If you start looking around, ask the right questions of Google, then you'll get to the person's name. And I'm not going to do that right now, because that's an exercise that I think folks can take on by themselves. What is this one? Where in the world? Oh, where in the world? Where is this? Where in the world? Okay, so here's an image. Okay. Okay, so I've downloaded an image and it's asking me where it is. And so now the image is, this is it, right? Okay, so here it is. And it asks me, where is it? Okay, so how do you solve this? And not really any other hints here, right? I mean, I guess you could, you know, is this a hint? Where in the world with a question mark? I mean, that's sort of the question. Is it a hint? I don't know. So there's an old computer game called Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Okay, that's not the answer. Which I don't know, you might sort of go down that path. That would be a bit of a red herring, but I can imagine somebody kind of going down that path. Basically, you have an image and you have to try to figure out where it is. And so there's a couple of approaches to doing something like this. There is a Google image search. So I could upload this. You can upload images in Google and have Google identify where that same image is on a website, right? And that's kind of a, I mean, that's you know, that's probably the thing I would do. That's the thing I might do first with this particular thing, is I might do a reverse image search on Google. And how do you do that? Google reverse image search. And I'm not going to do it right now. Find related images with reverse image search. So I click on that and go to images.google.com. Description of the picture I want to find. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to search for images on Google. Click search by image. Okay, so go to Google Images, and then you upload an image. So you click on search by image. Paste the image URL. All right, well, let's see. Copy, copy link address. Paste it there, search by image. Okay, so I'm doing a search. The URL doesn't refer to an image. The image is not publicly accessible. Oh, yeah, so wonder if I can just, upload an image, yeah. I should say, I don't think this is going to get you anywhere, but I think it's useful to show how this works. Okay. Okay. Here's some visually similar images. Yeah, so these are not, yeah, so these are visually similar, but there's not an ocean. So that thing, okay, that's Lisbon coast. Yeah, so Pacific Coast Highway. Yeah, this probably won't get you what you want. And this image you're not going to find on the internet because because it's a picture that I took myself and it's not uploaded anywhere. Okay, so what else can you do? Well, I have the image that I've downloaded to my local machine. So that reverse image search, that's a great way to find. In fact, it's a good way to you know, if you're looking at a website and there's a picture of somebody and you think it's still too generic and it might not be a real person, then you can pull that image down, you can upload it, and you can find, or if somebody connects with you on social media and you're like, this looks kind of fishy, you can grab the picture, do a reverse image search, and sometimes you'll find that image somewhere else, and that, you know, immediately you know that that's not a real person. So the other way that you can find sort of hidden information in pictures is through the Exif data, EXIF, Exif, and it's basically extended information about the image, and by extended information I mean things like you know, the kind of camera it was taken with, the latitude and longitude of where it was taken. You know, photographers can put other metadata into digital images. So Exif data is additional information on top of the image itself that's stored in a digital photograph. And there are a couple of tools that you can use to do this. Go to my downloads folder. So the file is here. It's this img 1802.jpg. There's a tool called Exif tool. That doesn't seem to be installed. Exif tool. So I'm going to add it, apt-get install Exif tool. Exif tool is a Linux command line tool, and it's not included in your Cyber Basics environment. So if you do an apt-get install, you can get it installed, and then you can use it on this image, and we'll see what we get. There's other ways to get Exif data. In fact, on my Windows machine, I downloaded that thing right to my Windows machine. So if I went to my File Explorer on my Windows machine, I could right-click this thing, and I could open it with there's a software called IrfanView, which is great image manipulation software, and you can get information about the image. So this is that Exif data, right? It provides you know, basic. So okay, here's Exif info. All right, here's the Exif data. So it says date, time that the image was taken, taken using an Apple iPhone 6S, orientation top left. That's interesting. So it's got resolution, and if you go further down, you can see some other information, but I don't see anything in here that says where it was taken. Sometimes there's a latitude and longitude, but it looks like there's no lat long here. So maybe if I look at IPTC info, keyword categories, credits origin. Oh, okay. Here we go. City, so the city this thing was taken. So again, this is a way for photographers to capture metadata in their digital images. And this says that the date it was taken was 12/13/2017. And this is taken in a city called Basseterre in St. Kitts in the Caribbean. And I'm going to, whoops, I just went back to my CyberRange VM here. Let's see if Exif tool will give me the same info. Exif tool. Oops. Acceleration vector mouse gives some interesting information about this picture. I don't see. The location information. Here's another thing that you can do is you can say strings image, strings image, and you could probably find it this way as well, because that Exif data is not going to be in any way encrypted or otherwise screwed up. And you might need to do you can specify the min length. Min length dash n min length. So I can say strings dash n6. Okay, this gives me 6 characters or longer. That's probably going to give me a better. Yeah, still. Yeah, so using strings to do this might take a little bit longer. And you're just looking for something that looks like a no-kidding word. Whoops. Yeah, so if you search this long enough, you'd find it. But I will say that, oh, there it is right there. So this took me a little bit of sniffing around, but I got to it. So I solved that a couple different ways. I use strings. So if you use strings and you dig through the strings that are spit out and look for things that are actually words. You may see a series of strings that represent ASCII characters in an image, but you're not going to see words unless it's a real word that's stored in the metadata of the image. So that's one way to find it. Another way is we looked at a couple of different tools for looking at Exif data. And so what else do we have here? What's behind the rocks? Okay, this is probably another this is okay. So this is another image. What's behind the rocks? And I would take that same approach to solving this one as I did to solving that previous one. I'm not sure what the answer is to this or exactly where it's hidden, but it's a similar sort of challenge. Two ways. Simply concatenate the passwords from the shadow file and submit as the key. Easy, right? Okay, so I can download the shadow file. So there's a shadow file, there's a password list. So let's look at the okay, so there's a set of passwords, so this is a shadow file from a Linux system. So there's set of usernames, masked, yellow, jester, caddy, and there's also the encrypted passwords, right? Okay, so I just need to break those passwords. How do you do that? Well, use a password cracker like John the Ripper. This also has a password list, right? So what that tells me is that I need to use that word list instead of using the John the Ripper standard word list. So I want to use John, but I want to look at John because I want to use a word list rules because it enables word list rules. Okay, so I want to provide my own word list. Oh, word list file. Word list. Okay, so if I give it a dash word list, okay, so I can say John shadow dash word list password. Okay, and solved all these quickly, right? Masked, yellow, jester, cat. So these are the usernames. These are the passwords. And so the name of this challenge is 2 ways to skin this cat, and it's you know, if you were to do some Googling on these usernames, then you might get to the fact that these are all you know, arch enemies of this secret squirrel in the secret squirrel comic, and then you could very quickly get to the you know, the other part of the name. So it's, you know, a couple of different ways you could approach this, but you can concatenate those together and then submit them as the flag, and that's the flag. This last one is particularly challenging. Lost's challenge with a twist. It's this would take some time to drill through, and I'm not going to do it right now. But there is a series of numbers. There's a poem here. There's more stuff on here than fits on my screen. So you'd want to do it. Let's maybe I could drill out and go to my so here I'm on my Windows desktop. Series of numbers. There's a poem here, and then pairs of numbers, and then there's a link to a picture. Okay, so this is a particular challenge, and you know, this requires some effort, right? You'd have to, you know, it's worth a lot of points, 200 points. But if you started, you know, if you did a reverse image search on that picture, for example, you would find something interesting. He's a famous mathematician. His name is Erdos. If you did some Googling with this and with this poem, you would get to a this is based on a historical CTF challenge from the DEF CON Capture the Flag competition, which is a sort of a very long-running CTF, and Lost is the you know, sort of the hacker name of the guy who creates these CTF challenges. It's actually not the DEF CON CTF, it's the DEF CON badge challenge, but it's a similar thing. It's like it's a crypto kind of a challenge. Crypto and sort of problem solving. And so, you know, basically you turn these into, each one of these is an ASCII character, so you turn these into ASCII characters, and it gives you some instructions, and then use those instructions to cross out some of these pairs of numbers, and then what you get is a phone number, and then you call the phone number, and it's there's a recording, and then you know, you figure out what the recording is, and the flag is essentially encoded in that recording. And so, quick story about this particular challenge. I used this in a CTF. You know, so I created this challenge it's based on a previous challenge, and I left some hints in here to give the students some pointers on how they might approach solving this thing. And it was solved. I used it during a statewide collegiate CTF called the Virginia Governor's Cyber Cup. It's a competition we host in VMI every February. The Virginia Cyber Range hosts it along with VMI, and There was only one team that solved it. It was the VMI team, and it was solved by two students who this was their first ever CTF. So they were newbies at capture the flag competitions, but they like latched onto this problem early on, and they weren't scared of the 200 points associated with it. This was the highest point challenge in the whole CTF. But they understood that this was sort of raw problem solving, and so these two students spent about, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours on this one challenge, and they solved it, with probably 30 minutes left to go in the CTF. But I mean, they were just, fired up. Their first CTF. This was a large amount of points for their team, and I don't know. It was really cool. They were thrilled with themselves, and I gave some remarks at the end of the capture the flag competition and called them out for solving this thing, because it was be awesome. So these are the kinds of things that you'll see in reconnaissance challenges, and I'm gonna stop there because I'm at the 1 hour mark. So I encourage you to solve some more of these CTF challenges. There's also a group of challenges in here. There's these ready player challenges. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are very much reconnaissance challenges also. So you might take a look at these and see if you can, they're fairly low point value challenges, but they're kind of fun to poke around with. All right, so with that, I'm going to stop. Thanks for joining today. And for those who have listened to multiple of these over the semester, thanks for being with me. And this is it for this term, but I look forward to starting up this series again in the fall semester. So I would say late August. There will certainly be an announcement in our newsletter. So if you're not a newsletter recipient, if you go to the Virginia Cyber Range website, virginiacyberrange.org, down at the very bottom of the page, there's a newsletter sign up. So you click there, you put in your email address, you get our monthly newsletter. We're not heavy-handed with the spam, so we send it once a month. And then we also have a Twitter feed, so you can join our Twitter feed and we'll announce it there also. Okay, so thanks, and look forward to next fall.